Alright, so Rod from SBO asked me to do a video on the central locking and alarm kit I'd installed. Unfortunately I didn't have the foresight to do it while I was installing it. It was only after I installed it that he asked me to do it, but I'm going to do a bit of a video on what I did. So this is the kit I used, or the two kits, the central locking kit's a Mongoose kit, and the alarm kit, so that's the Mongoose one, and the alarm kit was a Rhino one, but I don't imagine that these things vary too much from manufacturer to manufacturer. So I'll run you through what I've done. Alright, so this is where I mounted the siren, just here. I decided to work through this kit, the installation of this kit, pretty logically, because I figured that there's a lot to do. It's quite a big job, so I'd start somewhere logical and work my way through. So I started with putting the siren in before I got into any wiring, and I didn't want to drill any holes or damage the car unnecessarily, so I just undid one of the little screws for the, well, bolts I suppose, for the cover for the fan motor and that, and then I put the bracket in and did it back up, and then once I had the bracket in there, just these little slide, I'll try and get my camera around there, just these little slide bolt things that go in there, so it's pretty easy to mount the siren in after the bracket, which is what I did. And it's all pretty tight in there. I think it looks good there as well, and it makes good noise. I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to run there's a wire to mount an extra siren. I'm going to run that through to my air horns over here, but I'll get to that later when I get onto the wiring. Alright, so that's the siren. I was going to move on to the wiring, but before I forget, because I almost did, where the siren is here, I've just fed the wiring through with the aerial cable, and those red and green wires you see there, they're for the power aerial I have. So it goes up with the radio, which is the green one, and the other's power, which is the red one, but that's not really important for what we're doing. But that's where I fed the cable for the siren through, just into the glove box there. Alright, so next up we have the wiring, which is obviously one of the more important bits. I've taken the the switch panel and that sort of stuff off mine already, which you'll obviously need to do. Mine might look a bit different to yours because you might have a radio here, which is obviously where they were originally meant to go, but in mine I've got a bunch of gauges which clip in there, which I can easily remove when I want to do this sort of thing, so I've got a bit of space there I can work with. You might have a bit less because you might just have this switch panel which you can take off, but I'm sure you know your car and you can sort of work out what you have to do. It just makes it a bit easier for me though. Anyway, so we'll move on to the wiring. Being what it is, there's quite a lot of wiring, and so you'll find that with the kits you get this really large wiring harness, and that can be a bit daunting. So what I did that you might want to do is I just went through the book. I'll show you my book quickly. Yeah, this one here, and if yours is anything like mine, which hopefully it will be, some of these things tend to be written in Jinglish. Luckily this one comes from Sydney, so it's a bit easier to understand, but it runs through what each wire is for. For example, red's power, green's the indicator wires, blurry, yeah, green's the indicator wires, and so on and so forth. So I went through and I found all the wires I didn't need, and then yeah, I found all the wires I didn't need, and then I put them all to one side and cable tied them together, and then I grouped together the wires which were for power and earth and that, so I had a logical assortment of wires. Hang on a second, I just gotta use both hands to get these wires out. Right, here we are. So obviously, as I've already wired mine all up, it's going to look a bit different, but basically these were all the wires which I didn't need, which I bundled up to one side. You might wish to cut them off, but I just don't like to cut things in case they come in handy later on. For example, this red and white wire here, in my kit, is the boot release wire, so I don't have anything to connect it to at the moment, but in the future, if I chose to get a boot release out of another car or a generic one, which I know Joel over on SBO has done, you can connect that up to the cable mechanism that already releases it. If you get one that's, you know, a cable thing and connected to a solenoid, which has wires on the other end, and then you can connect this to it and release it with the system. So, and there's a few other ones in there which might be of use in the future, so I don't like cutting them off, so I just sort of bundle them up like this and then stuff them in. But while I'm making this video, one thing I do want to use, here's a good example actually, because I'm about to take one out. Good thing I didn't cut it off, is this orange wire here. Probably when you're doing yours you won't really need to use this, but given that I perhaps a little unusually have air horns up the front, this wire is to connect in secondary sirens, and so yeah, given that I have air horns up the front, I'd like to connect it to my horns, so if anyone tries to break into my car, they really do get a fright with the horns going off as well as the siren. So I'm going to run that through to the front, and I'll do that in just a minute. Alright, so once you've got all your wires sorted, what you're going to want to do is start connecting things up. Hang on, I'll just see if I can get a bit more. Sorry, just a bit of a technical hiccup there. So yeah, once you've got all your wiring sorted, you've got everything organised the way you want it to be, then you can start wiring things up. Now, before you wire up the, start putting in the harness for the security, what do they call it, security system, the alarm, what I'd do is I'd put in the wiring for just the alarm, the siren, sorry, itself. So before you go on to doing the whole alarm kit, I'd start with just the wiring for the siren and then move on from there. So a bit hard to see in there. Like I said, I do have a lot of wiring going on, but I've got a couple of wires running through for the siren. See if I can find them, and no, you really can't see them there, but you can take my word for it that I put them through. So as you can probably see up the back here, it might not be so clear through all the wiring there, but my earth tree is full. I've run out of earths. In fact, you can see over there I put an earth for something else up there because I've run out of earths down here. So when I did the wiring for the siren, I decided that I had to pick up power from the fuse box anyway, fairly obviously, so I decided that I'd just earth down there. So now if we have a look at my fuse box, we've got a few things going on. I'll try and turn it around so you can see in there.
wanted to connect all the power into fuse 8 because that tends to be constant power. So what I did was here you go, you can see just in here, got the, so this is the wiring from the siren that I've dropped down underneath the dash, and I've connected the power, put a little bullet connector on the power cable, and I've connected to another bit of red wire I had, and that goes round to fuse 8, which you probably can't see very well. Try and get in there. Anyway, it's connected in there, and so what does that leave us with? That leaves us with a yellow wire, which was the yellow wire, which also I put a bullet connector on. That's, try and get in there a bit closer. That's the wire that connects the siren to the alarm kit. And then we've just got a little earth, which I put a I put a loop on so that it can earth where the fuse box screws in, just up here. I did have to clean up that spot where the fuse box screws in. It wasn't creating an earth at all at first, but now that I have cleaned it up, it creates quite a good earth. So yeah, I have everything down there. Makes it easy too, since they all come through in the same cable. Rather than slitting that or anything else, I can just drop the whole thing down there. So that's what I did with those, but you might have other ideas, but at any rate you are going to have to pick up power from the fuse box. So once that was all done, I moved on to the harness of the alarm kit. So I worked through this list fairly logically, and you've got, like I said, I'd already connected all the cable tied all the power cables and everything together. So you've got, I'll put this down here actually. So you've got your red, which is your power, and your black, which is your earths. Green's your indicator wires, and that sort of business. So I brought the red, brought both the reds down, and here we are, and I threw them into a Scotch lock onto a cable that was already going to fuse 8. So you can see you've got the two going in there, and so that's where the alarm kit picks up its power from. The next were the earths. So before I connected in any earths, and actually before I did the power cables as well, I just went through this list and found everything that was going to need an earth. So you've got two black wires are earth, then we move down white, green, grey, yellow, red. And for the others I had to know which were needed for the central locking kit, sorry. So I went, mine was a negative pulse central locking system. Most of the aftermarket ones that you'll buy are. So I knew that red and blue needed to be an earth, black and green needed to be an earth, and also those blacks that I had. So your colours may vary, but right. So I bundled all my earths together, as you can see here. Put them in one big loop, which I'd then just put with the screw where the fuse box screws in, like I said I did with those other earths. So that's the power and the earths sorted, which are obviously the two main things for your circuit. But if we come back to the list over here and have a bit of a look what it says. So it says red, we'll just run down the list. Red, which is power, which we've done, so that fuse into fuse 8. Black, which is your earth, so I've sorted all the earths there. Then you've got your two green indicator wires. So if I come over to the hazard light switch here, you can see I've taken the two indicator wires and I've put little Scotch locks on them with the wires from the alarm kit for the indicator flash wires. You might not like Scotch locks, you can connect them in other ways I'm sure, but that's what I did, and it seems to work pretty well. I like using Scotch locks because they're pretty easy to use, but as I said, there probably are other ways of doing things. But yeah, connecting into the back of the hazard light switch was a pretty easy way to go. So we'll come back to our list here, and so we've done the green, which is the indicator. Now, of course your colours might vary if you buy a different kit, but I'm just going to talk about my colours because it'll just make things easier. So then you've got the white and green, which is your ignition input. That's next in our list. So come down to the fuse box, and as you can see, I just connected that into fuse. What fuse is that? That's the last fuse along, so that's fuse 12. From memory, 11 works as well. So connected in there because it needs ignition power. And yeah, that's the third one on our list. So then we'll go back to our list. Bit repetitive, I know. Now we have grey negative trigger input, connect to negative trigger output wire from optional ultrasonic or microwaves. Right, so that's not one of the needed wires. So that's one of those that at the start you would have bundled, saying I don't need these wires, so we don't need to worry about that. The next one is the yellow wire, which was for the siren. I did mention it before, but I just put a bullet connector on that and connected it into the siren that way. You can see that there. I did mention that before. So that's how the siren connects in. Right, then it says the blue and green negative LED output. That's already connected into the LED. But what I did with mine was I just put it in next to the switches in the switch panel. So I actually did this at the end, but I don't suppose it matters too much when you do it. So I drilled a hole. Well, I had one already drilled for a switch, but I didn't want to drill another, which is why I've got that washer on there. But yeah, drill a hole in the instrument, in the blanking plate for the switch panel, and just pop the LED in there, and then it can sit next to your other switches, like so, and it'll be pretty obvious when it's on or off. Yeah, so that's the LED. Alright, so we've done the LED there. The next one is the immobilizer circuit. So you cut the fuel pump and the starter wire, and you redirect them through the brain of the alarm system. But I wasn't keen to do that because if anything goes wrong with it, I can't start the car. You may wish to, but anyway, that's pretty straightforward. So we'll move on. White yellow, that's one that you would have had bundled up because you weren't going to use it. It's an optional one. Then the pink, you just connect that into the wire that runs under the dash for the jam switches for the door. It'll be pretty obvious. It runs from just out next to the door, and you won't be able to miss it. And then that brings us to the violet bonnet switch negative input. So that's not as simple as just hooking it into a wire that's already there. So we'll move on to that one. So the idea of this one is that when your deck lid's opened and the system is armed, it'll set off the alarm. Now, like most cars, the Beetle didn't come with a jam switch in the bonnet, but it's pretty easy to do because there's a little rubber plug that normally sits here, and you can just put a jam switch in there. So I have mine connected. Why that's not working. Yeah, so I have mine connected to LED strip lighting as well. It's not working at the moment because I've unhooked the negative terminal on my battery to do all my electrics. But yeah, so mine connects to that as well. So what I did here was I'll quickly show you under the car. So you can see that's where the jam switch runs. And that wire just goes up and into the body, into the engine bay. So, what I did here was I connected a Scotch lock into that wire I have running around. And then that wire I connected into the test plug using another Scotch lock. Using another Scotch lock I connected into the test plug there into a brown and white wire which runs down underneath the seat. Now that brown and white wire isn't needed, it's part of the test system which is no longer used. You could just cut it out of the test block and do it that way, but I like having it looking like it's there, so that's why I did it with Scotch locks. But yeah, so this is the test connector wires. I've used mine for all sorts of different things. That's my positive cable for the LED strip lighting I was talking about, and I have another one which connects through to the reversing lights for a reversing camera I plan to put in the future. But this is the one that is important to us. So it connects through to this blue wire here, which is one I've joined into the rather short purple cable or violet cable that was supplied for this purpose, and then I've just run that. I don't know how well you can see it, but I've run it through there, and just along this carpet strip here. I've got this so it's quite easy to lift up, but yours might be a bit more tricky. And then you can see by the time it gets to the end here, it's become the purple one, and I just run it up there under the carpet, and then up to the brain there. Alright, then we have the white and red, that's that one I talked about before. That you may you may wish to connect up to the boot release. Sorry, I think I might have said before that the violet one was the boot release. I meant bonnet release. Apologies if I was a bit misleading there. But I showed you anyway what how the violet one worked for me. So yeah, the white and red is the next one, which is boot release. I talked a bit about that before, and as the Beetle's set up, you can't really connect it, but you can get a solenoid and hook it up later. But it's not something I've done yet, so that I had bundled with my wires which weren't being used. Then onto the orange, which, as I said, I'm going to connect into my air horns, but probably won't end up using that. And then what do we have? We have black, blue, green, yellow, red, blue, blue, yellow, red, green, black, green, which are all to do with the central locking, and then brown isn't used. So if we turn the page over and go and have a look at the central locking, so we've got the black and blue, which isn't used. Green and yellow is the unlock pulse negative output. Red and blue is the earth. Blue and yellow is not used. And red and green is the lock pulse. And then black and green's an earth as well. So all of those earths, you'll recall, we put in with our earths before. So the only ones we should still have to work with will be the green and yellow, and the red and green, which I had bundled up at the start as my two central locking wires, but I'm not sure if you would have done that. Alright, so we'll have a quick look at those. So in my central locking kit, the green and yellow wire connected to a brown wire, and the red and green one connected to the white wire. Now, it was a bit hard to tell which would connect to which, because all it said on the wiring diagram for that one was that there were two lock wires, wires to connect to an external remote system. It didn't say which was which, but I'll get to that in a minute. Now, the wiring harness for the central locking is much simpler. It basically just has a positive, a negative, and then the wires that control the central locking itself. So you can go. So I'm sure you know how to connect those the earth and the positive by now. So we'll move on to the central locking motor. It's this gun type motor here. I made up a bracket to connect it into the existing hole for the door skin to pop into, and had to use a pretty big washer, but you may want to do that a bit differently. It's up to you. Another screw hole wouldn't hurt to secure it to the door, but I didn't want to drill in where I didn't have to. That then connects up into a rod here, which then there's a little connector to join it into the existing rod for the door lock. So it's pretty simple operation. One thing to note is that one of the motors, or maybe two, some do it for the passenger side as well, will have 5 wires, the other will just have 2. Or maybe 3 on the others, but from memory I think it was just 2. Anyway, you want to connect the 5-wire one up into the driver's door, because that's the master control, or if you have 2 of those and you want to connect one into the passenger door, you can do that as well. But certainly there needs to be one on the driver's door. And then just run your wires sort of neatly. I need to fix mine up. And then that's pretty much everything, just connecting the brains. So you can see I haven't done that yet. So here comes the brain for the alarm kit. Apologies, I dropped my camera there, but anyway, connecting that alarm, the brain for the alarm kit, and then pack it in where you want it. Be a good idea to secure it somehow. They recommend cable tying it, but I haven't got to that yet. And then you want to connect in the brain for the central locking as well, so I'll need to find the end for that. And then with both the brains connected in there, as I said, secure them to something. Cable tie would be probably the best way of doing it. So you can secure them onto something solid. Yeah, so that's everything. So then you just put it all back together and away you go.